Welcome to this new tutorial about our latest game, Warriors of the Blue. In this video, we'll show you the entire sequence of play of one turn. For this example, we chose the second scenario, Operation Pedestal. Please refer to the rules booklet which you can freely download for other inputs about the scenario. In Operation Pedestal, the allied player has the main objective of bringing a convoy of vital supplies from Gibraltar to Malta. The Axis player must prevent this at all costs. He can count on 2 squadrons of armored cruisers and a dozen of destroyers based at Naples, and more importantly, on a great number of aircraft in the airfields of Sicily and Sardinia. The allied player has a bigger fleet, but fewer planes, that is, only those embarked on the escorting aircraft carriers and a bunch of fighters and bombers based at Malta. Let's now give a look at the fleet setup and deployment. The first action that the players must do in the first impulse of the game is to assemble and deploy their fleets. This is done by picking the counters that are listed in each scenario from the game box and placing them in the fleet display. Players can form up to 6 fleets simply by placing the desired ships in the numbered fleet box. Those fleets are kept a secret to the other player. The Axis player chooses to keep all his ships together in the first fleet. These counters will be shown to the other player if the fleet is sighted. We'll see this later. For now, they're placed in the player's minimaps that are kept secret as seen before for the fleet's display. He also assigns 1 full mark from the aircraft carrier Eagle as an air escort for the 3rd fleet. Now, in the first impulse of the first phase, players can move the fleets in adjacent zones. The allied player moves on his minimap Fleet 1 in Zone C1 and Fleets 2 and 3 in Zone D2. The Axis player cannot see this movement. In the meantime, the Axis player, as seen by the allied player, moves his first fleet from B2 to C2. The movement of fleets happens only in this phase of the turn. Now we go to the second impulse. Players can deploy air and naval sighting units. This happens in a common map, so each player knows where the other has placed his sighting units. Each scenario lists how many air sightings and submarines each player can deploy. Air sighting counters can be moved. Submarines are fixed for the entire game. Now we are at the third impulse, the weather check. Players roll to see if the zones where they place the air sighting counters will be cloudy or not. Now players try to find the enemy fleets. To do this, each player rolls 2 6-sided dice, subtracting 1 for die rolls in zones where there is a clouds marker on the common map. If the result is between 6 and 12, any fleets present in the zone will be spotted, and the opposing player must reveal the composition of the sighted fleet. In this case, the die roll is good, but since there's no fleet to spot, the allied player doesn't see anything. In this other zone instead, the Axis player placed 3 airplanes. One of them makes contact. The allied player reveals one of the 2 fleets at random. It happens to be the one with 13 cargoes, 2 oil tankers, 1 armored cruiser squadron, and 1 anti-aircraft cruiser. The Axis player deems it a perfect target. The 4 airplanes placed by the allied player cannot see anything, leaving him wondering where the Italian fleet may be. He now tries to see if any of his submarines manage to find the Italians, which they do. By rolling an 11, an English submarine sees the Italian fleet. The attempt by the Italian destroyer flotilla to sink the submarine fails. The submarine attacks 1 armored cruiser counter and deals 1 damage point. All the other submarines in the game cannot make contact during this phase. The game proceeds to Impulse 5. Now the Axis player has a target, and the aircraft in the Sardinian airfields are ready to attack. The Axis player chooses to launch 4 of his 7 SM-79 torpedo bombers, escorted by 2 Reggiane 2001 in one formation, and 4 Junkers 88, escorted by the only BF-109 in a second formation. He calculates that at least some bombers should pass. 2 counters placed in the Axis air formations 1 and 2, and the relevant markers are placed on the common map. Now the air formations move to the attack. The impulse marker passes from 5 to 6. First of all, the air formations counters are placed on the display. In this case, the Axis player chooses to deploy the air formation number 2, the one composed of the Junkers and the Bf-109. Against them, there is the full mark that the aircraft carrier Eagle launched as an escort. First of all, there is a dogfight of fighters against fighters. This combat is simultaneous. The full mark inflicts 1 point of damage to the 109, but the 109 attacks makes no effect. Then the fighter attacks the bombers, again inflicting 1 damage point on one bomber. This time, the return fire from the bomber's formation destroys it. Now the action passes to the air attack display. Here, the Allied player deploys the ships of the attacked fleet in the center, and the Axis player places the bombers in the outer space. Then, the Axis player places 4 target markers, 1 for each attacking bomber. First of all, the ships fire their anti-aircraft guns against the bombers. In our example, the fleet can fire 4 AA balls, so the Allied player chooses to place a target marker on each of the Junkers 88. The anti-aircraft fire is not simultaneous, but is resolved before the bombers attack. In our example, the anti-aircraft fire damages another bomber that receives 1 point of damage. Now the bombers attack the ships. The Axis player rolls 2 6-sided dice, 4 times 1 for each target marker he placed before, and with a result of 8 to 12, 8 is achieved. 1 cargo is hit and receives 1 damage point. Now the Allied player must roll the dice to see how heavy the damage is. The first roll is a 10, so another damage point is taken. Then he rolls a 9, so the damage points are now 3. Now he rolls a 6, so no other damage points are taken and the die roll ends. Let's say that the other air formation of the Axis player accomplishes nothing, and so the attack is over. Both Axis air formations return to the Sardinian airfield, and the planes are placed in the rearming section of the airfield. The impulse marker now goes into the 7th slot, Fleet Combat. But during this turn, no fleets of the opposing players are in the same zone, since the game has just begun. Hence, this phase will be skipped, but we'll use another turn as an example. An Italian fleet formed by 1 armored cruiser squadron and 2 destroyer flotillas is attacking a British fleet composed by 2 light cruiser squadrons and a destroyer flotilla. First of all, players must choose what naval units go in the first line, what in the second, and eventually what goes in the third one. In this last one, they won't be able to participate in the combat. The Italian player deploys 2 destroyer flotillas in the first line and the armored cruiser in the second. The British player placed all 3 of his ships in the first line. Now, players must decide whether to deploy the smokescreen or not. The British player places it, the Italian doesn't. Now, it's time to fire the torpedoes. It's simultaneous. The Italian player has 4 torpedo attacks available and chooses to place 2 target markers for each British light cruiser. The British player fires all of his 6 torpedoes against the Italian armored cruiser. The die roll to hit with torpedoes must be from 8 to 10 in order to inflict 1 damage point, and 11 to 12 to inflict 2. There is a -1 modifier for the smokescreen, and the British suffers another -1 because the target is in the second line. The Italian rolls a modified 6 and an 8 on the first light cruiser, inflicting 1 damage point on it, and a 10 and an 11 on the second, for a total damage of 3 points on the second light cruiser. The British rolls a modified 4, 6, 7, 8, 10, and then again 10 on the Italian armored cruiser, inflicting 3 damage points. As per Rule 12.1, the damage effects are applied after the end of each round. It's now time for the guards. The 2 Italian destroyer flotillas attack the British one, and the Italian armored cruiser attacks the other light cruiser, that received 3 hits during the torpedo combat. The British must attack all the units in the first line before they can fire on the units in the second. So, one of the destroyers attacks one of the Italian DD, and one light cruiser attacks another Italian destroyer flotilla. The second light cruiser attacks the armored cruiser, hoping to sink her. The British DD rolls a modified 6 and fails to hit. The first light cruiser rolls a modified 10 against its target, the other Italian DD. The Axis player must roll for damage and rolls an 8. The DD takes 2 points of damage. The second British light cruiser rolls against the armored cruiser, but its modified 7 doesn't hit. Now it's time for the Italians to return fire. Both destroyers fail to hit the enemy, but the armored cruiser fires its 3 salvos and rolls a modified 4, 5, and 8. The British light cruiser is hit and received, after British player rolls for damage, the full damage point. This ends the first of 3 rounds of the surface combat. The result is as follows. One British light cruiser is sunk. The other received 1 damage point. The British destroyer is unarmed. The Italian armored cruiser received 3 damage points. One of the destroyers received 2, and the other one none. Both players now have the option to end the combat. Both agree that discretion is the better part of valor, and the combat comes to an end. Now it's time for the last impulse of the phase. On the common map, players remove those fleet markers that were placed there because of sighting. Then they remove the air sighting markers. On the airfields and aircraft carriers, both players can repair 50% of the damage points taken by their planes. The repaired aircraft can move from the rearmament section to the ready one. Finally, move the phase marker 1 space forward and place the impulse marker in the first box, thus ending the turn.